I sat down with Alexandra Rose of Alexandra Rose Vedic Astrology to talk about Jupiter going through Sagittarius, Jupiter Ketu conjunction, a lot of the changes that we've been dealing with, the zodiacs, and a lot more. Hey folks, I'm here again with Alexandra Rose, excellent astrologer, also one of my students, but doing great work on her own aside from that. And she's has been sharing a lot of updates and has been doing great work tracking the planets moving through the sky. And we're going to do a sort of deep dive into some of the recent shifts that I've also been talking about. Jupiter moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. We're going to talk about the Gandanta points, those nakshatras. We're going to talk about Jupiter approaching Ketu, and then also Saturn is going to be moving. So quite a bit here. Welcome, Alix.
Thank you. Thank you.
How's it going?
It's going good. There's just been a lot going on. So I've been really starting to pay attention, really deeply to everything. Happy to talk
And
about
when we spoke yesterday, you were telling me about, we had a conversation yesterday, and Alix was talking about how a lot of her clients lately have been just really, it's sort of a lot of stuff waking up and a lot of dark stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, oh, even contemplating a lot of dark things and whatnot. And we sort of got into it. It's like, yeah, it's this transition between Scorpio and Sagittarius that I've been talking about in my updates. And so I wanted to bring Alix on to share some of her experiences about what she's been hearing from her clients and how she feels this as well. So take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that it's really interesting, and I've been watching and knowing that Jupiter was going to shift into Sagittarius as of November 4th, November 5th. And I spoke in my Facebook Live yesterday how I was not necessarily expecting it to be as powerful as it has been in the ways that it has been. And I think that one of the biggest things I've seen is that Jupiter, as we were saying, is moving out of this Temasek sign of Scorpio into its Soppec home of Sagittarius. And that shift from Tamas to Sattva is really, I think, what's shaking a lot of people up. Plus, that the rulership of Mula, that first placement in Sagittarius, which is a very destructive placement.
So, so we talk about Tamas and Sattva all the time, but
yeah.
let's unpack that a little bit and unravel that for what that means, especially the Tamasic quality of Scorpio and the Sattvic quality of Sagittarius. How do you see those things? What's this shift that's happening?
Well, tamas is there's the three gunas, which are said to kind of bind us to this life here on Earth. And so tamas is the I'll say lowest quality, but not as a judgment. It's just kind of that heaviness, that girth, that sort of that really holds us down on Earth. And it's these things that we work with that are really just, as I said, heavy. And have that deeper quality of our day-to-day existence in them. When we speak about tamasic foods, for instance, it's in like Ayurveda, it's those things that really keep us down, hold us down, have that kind of lethargic quality to them. And so when Jupiter, this planet that is very guru-oriented, teacher, inspirational, kind of searching for something higher, when it's going through a Temasek sign, those sort of lessons are being taught to us. We're dealing with that kind of heaviness, like while Jupiter was going through Scorpio. We're learning, and also Scorpio is a very deep sign. It's very vulnerable. It really holds a lot of that subconscious, shadowy realm. So these are the lessons we're naturally moving through as Jupiter navigates his way through Scorpio.
Yeah, so those deeper psychological, because Scorpio is the water sign so it's like that heavy, like those emotions that are in our bones and in our body. Tamas is also very much related to the body, and especially that the body wants to survive. So the reason Tamas can be difficult is because if we identify as a body, things get hard after a while. And so in many ways, the difficulty of Tamas is trying to survive as a body, realizing, but wait a minute, I'm not just a body. And so when things start to move out of that. But again, the power of Tamas is that we need to integrate everything through the body as well and not bypass it. So this is why the gunas, we have to be careful to not judge them as a good or bad, But yeah, so I just wanted to add that as well. And Scorpio winds up being even how the emotions and the water is connected to the body. It's that somatic connection between body and feeling and emotion. Scorpio really holds a lot of that part, and that fear that of being like sort of emotionally sort of out of control.
Yeah. 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 And I think that we've all been experiencing that in our own ways, you know, as Jupiter moves through, as that's what we're supposed to be learning. And I think as it moves into a Soppec sign, which is higher, lighter, not necessarily about the physical body, but about kind of this higher awareness, it's very blessed in that movement. But so many people do believe that they are the body and function on this Temasek level. And so it's like as it's moving into Sagittarius, it's saying, okay, now we need to kind of move away from that learning, move into something higher. The shaking up of what's happening is really, I think, creating a lot of friction for people, and things that as it moves, things that were kind of left undone, kind of pushed to the side. It's like Jupiter saying, we need to finish this now, especially as it moves through that Gandanta, you know, between Scorpio and Sagittarius, which is bringing up a lot for people.
Yeah, yeah. And so this whole movement from that sort of primal attachments and habits of Scorpio, because again, even like those fixed signs, there's a lot of entrenched, you know, habits and ideas. You know, we're very attached to our emotions. They're fixed. It's like fixed water. It's like when we have a feeling, it's like, it's me. I don't just get to change it. I feel it. It's me. And it doesn't change so easily. And so Sagittarius was, you know, Jupiter was just in that sign for a year. And so it was a time where our teachings were really trying to, you know, very much revolved around this deeper embodiment, emotional embodiment of what we believed in, and bringing our beliefs into that kind of psychosomatic survival experience. But then it moves on, doesn't stay there forever. Jupiter then moves and says, okay, now hopefully you learn this lesson, that you're not the body, that you're not the emotions, that there's a higher purpose. Now, what is it? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what's next yet. This is why these Gandantas are like, I don't know. I don't know. How do I know? That's what you're supposed to know. Come on, you're the teacher. Teach me. But those teachings aren't embodied. So this is that embodiment sort of gap.
Totally. Yeah. And I see it really as a very experiential time, you know, because what I've learned along the way is that it's like you can be told different things, but until you go through the experience yourself, it's not embodied, it's not authentic. And so that's why there's so much potential now to really be able to see, okay, truth from lie in our personal awareness, you know, these things that we've been carrying. It's like as it's shifting now, it's saying you can't take that with you. I mean, you can, but you're going to continue to suffer. And as it shifts into Sagittarius, it's really asking us to figure out what inspires us, move into that hope, into that higher guidance and awareness, that Sattvic way of doing things. And I think that's what's tripping a lot of people up, especially if they're not necessarily on the spiritual path, or they don't have that desire to live in that way. It's not so easy to make the transition. And even people that are on the spiritual path or do want to have that as a way of life, it's still bringing up all of the unresolved things that they may be comfortable with, that they're not quite willing to let go of, even if they thought they were. It's like now we're at this experiential time where, you know, you're being put to the test to really move into Sagittarius like that.
Yeah, and this is really what astrology shows. And this is why, you know, I really like your work, the way you've taken the teachings and applied them, is that it's not just a bunch of ideas and theories. This is real stuff. And you said something, and I like to work on different layers. When you said you can't take it with you, I don't know if you were even talking about life itself or just life transitions. But these Gandanta points, when we talk about Gandanta, conceptually, we're going to talk about Jeshta and Mula specifically. But one of the things that happens with Gandanta that's different than other transitions is it is a break. It's like a hard stop in the energy. And I just want to reestablish something, that this is the sidereal zodiac coming to life. Because again, in every Vedic astrology text, it says Ashwini and Aries start the zodiac circle. What that means is that by the time you get to Scorpio, Sagittarius, you have this Gandanta, right? Which means that the Rashis and the Nakshatras both stop. It's like a hard stop. It's like a it's like a chasm that opens. This is pretty much what Gandanta means. It's like a chasm where there's no unifying energy between those 2 points. Every other Rashi is bridged by a nakshatra. The transition between Taurus, between Aries and Taurus has Kritika nakshatra. There's a theme. And there's a theme between Taurus and Gemini through Mrigashira. There's a theme between Gemini and Cancer through Punarvasu. There's no theme between Cancer and Leo. It's a hard stop. Aslesha, Magha, boom, a stop. There's like a chasm. And it's a moment where there's like a reset. And then again, you have it between Leo and Virgo through Uttar Falguni, through Virgo Libra, through Chitra, through Libra Scorpio, through Vishaka, and then a hard stop. Then Jeshta comes, stop, Mula comes, boom. And it means that you need to, then something gets destroyed. Something has to get sacrificed. Something dies at that point. It's literally what it is. This is why when someone has planets at this point, that's why these areas, especially right near the edge, which is where we are right now, we're still at that 1 or 2 degrees of this transition where we right now need to let something die. And we're always like, oh, but somehow I'm going to integrate the blah, I'm integrating. And this section of the zodiac is like, no, you're not. This is why Jeshta is like that final heroic, like attempt to hang on to the old paradigm, or the heroic possibility of letting it go courageously. And Mula is the heroic opportunity to have things uprooted and taken out and destroyed. Uprooted means literally even like your whole belief system is being uprooted. And that's what Jupiter in Mula is about. Your belief system and values and sense of purpose and inspiration is being uprooted. And we want to kind of, well, how do I work with the total chasm in my life right now? So I just wanted to put that out there as well, because this is very important to understand the structure of the sidereal and the power and beauty and majesty of the sidereal integrity of these 2 zodiac circles. And you see it in these moments. This is why people like myself, who's been tracking this for 15 years, uses this. It's not just some theory. You see it in these moments when planets go back and forth. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back over to you. We've had Saturn going back and forth over this Gandanta point for the last several years. This is why it's been even more kind of wrenching for everybody. And Jupiter coming behind it is actually great healing. And we've all gone through enormous transition for the last several years as Saturn has sort of went back and forth over it, and then Ketu joined Saturn. Now Jupiter comes through and is sort of trying to bring the higher lesson behind it all. But we're in this Gandanta point of like facing that chasm and coming on the other side of it now. So last thing, promise.
Oh, I love it. It's all good.
What's that?
I said, I love it. It's all good.
Yeah, I know. But, well, as I told you yesterday, but people are going to start saying, oh, you didn't let her talk. No, but the last thing that I'll say, just to tee it up for you, is that Jupiter also went back and forth over the Gandanta last year. So this is Jupiter's last transit through it as well. Jupiter went up to it, slowed down and stopped, then went back over it. Now he's finally gone through it again. So this is also the culmination of Jupiter and Saturn's transitions for a couple years through this Gandanta point. So now it's kind of like we get that there's no turning back, because we've been trying to hang on and trying to integrate this for the last few years. Now Jupiter's finally gone, okay, now I'm passing over it, and I'm not going to pass over it again for the next 12 years. There you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And that's what I think a lot of people are feeling, is like that fear of the fact that they can't go back. It's like, that's where I was saying yesterday that someone told me it's like she's experiencing that this kind of low grade frequency that was existing in her life that was keeping her insecure and stuck. It's like she knew it was there, but she was able to function. She was able to go to work and have a healthy relationship. But now it's like, it's not low grade anymore. It's like everywhere she turns, it's on loudspeaker. And it's like, it's really causing her to feel depressed and anxious and overly insecure, because it's like loud. But that's exactly what happens during these experiential moments where we're creating a shift, is that we have to see our awareness is crucial for us to make any change. So we have to see it, we have to become aware of it, and then we have to, as you said, courageously take that step to do something different. But that's where a lot of people are getting stuck. Again, if they feel safer in the more Temasek energy of the body and that Scorpio energy, then it's very uncomfortable moving into Sagittarius. But what it's doing exactly is it's trying to uproot those things that we can't carry. And then we have to be okay with what comes up when we recognize that we can't take it with us. It's like, oh, but then my pain, my suffering, it's safe there. But you know you don't want it, really, truly. But you do at the same time because you're safe in it. And that's, I think, what's bringing up a lot for people right now.
And for each individual, it shows up based on what the planets rule, based on what these houses are. It's like, oh, but I can bring my bad relationship with me and still have a connection to God where I feel inspired. And like, I could bring all of my codependent projections and anger and frustration with me as I aspire to the highest good. No. You're only going to be able to connect with the sattva. I'll have you explain what the sattvic is. There's a reason that something like yoga and these practices are to cultivate sattva, because there is no sattva possible when we're stuck in tamas. It literally, tamas is the covering that prevents the sattva from coming into our life. This is why yoga is meant to cultivate sattva, so that we can actually meditate and connect.
Right.
Sattva is still one of the gunas, but it's the peaceful, calm, balanced guna, because when we're in that guna, then the grace can flow.
Right.
This is why we cultivate sattva, so we can actually connect with the vibration. Sattva is like tuning the radio to the right frequency, right? Because the channel is always playing, but the radio isn't tuned to the right frequency. It's on a Temasek or a Rajasic frequency.
Exactly.
So sattva is like tuning the mind, right? So when you're in sattva and you're carrying around all the rajas and tamas of desire or darkness, then your frequency isn't tuned. But anyway, what would you say about that sattvic quality?
Well, I would piggyback off what you said, that to me, it's really that purity that we have that allows us to connect. And so because our lives are generally more Temasek and Rajasic in nature, because we go to work, we live in a body, we have to eat food, it's like we don't have time to focus on these things, we tell ourselves, then we can't, it's harder. It takes a lot of focus and concentration. But as we start to live in a more sattvic way, internally and externally, we see that pure connection. We see the way that when we have less interference with whatever it is, that we can connect to something greater. And that that when you're in a sattvic way of living and you have that pure connection that you're consistently cultivating, because if you're not consistently cultivating, it's like the radio station just changes on its own or something, like back to default mode. It's like when you're sattvic, it's a detachment, but it's not an unhealthy, apathetic, depressed detachment. It's a detachment from the play of life that's going on, because you're connected to something greater. You have a pure channel inside and you can see things playing out, but there's not so much of that Temasek, Rajasic kind of connection to it. You're able to see that it's all a great play and that you're here to experience through it. And so sattvic really is helpful. That's why Jupiter moving into Sagittarius can be so profound for some of us if we're able to connect with that, because we can receive the higher teachings and we can feel truth and untruth more easily because we're attuned correctly. And that's why it's so beautiful. But we have to let those things go that are holding us back, and see that yes, it's uncomfortable to the flesh, to that Temasek, but it's also a higher way of living, that all the scriptures, the yoga, everything is what is saying, do this, it's gonna be good. But we have to really work at it because we're not naturally tuned to that radio station, that frequency.
And that's actually the power of the tamas. Again, this is where, we learned this in the certification course. And this is one of the things that I learned because I came from such a long yogic background. When we talk about the body and tamas, actually, again, we can say that it's the body, but it's also the body as the vehicle of liberation. When we understand what the body is, that's sattvic. So again, all of these spiritual practices need to happen through the body. They're practices. Practices. And again, that was also the great quality of Jupiter going through Scorpio as well. So many people got into hatha yoga and practices, and because Jupiter was demanding that, because it's like, because we can't control our mind and emotions, So Jupiter was actually bringing us much more into these somatic practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people I talk to really got much more into their hatha yoga practice and having to deepen that. Now that it moves into Sagittarius, though, one of the things is we're afraid to be free. We're afraid of our liberation.
Yes.
Because liberation is not always liberating, especially because we have attachment. And you said it brings detachment. It brings detachment from attachment, I think.
Yeah.
Because we still want to carry our other things with us, because we still have feelings about those people in our life, even if it's hard. How do I move forward? I don't know what the future holds. I feel inspired now more, but I still am carrying baggage and remnants of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how I see that first nakshatra of Mula, which is that kind of uprooting. We were talking about that. You want to shed some light on that nakshatra, because you are, I know you have a lot of, really powerful ideas about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that that's exactly what you're saying. It's like it's perfectly timed that it would go into Mula next, because it's not just, okay, we're moving from Scorpio now, get into Sagittarius, do it like this. It's like now we have this time where the uprooting happens. And, like what I was saying before, that in order for things to be uprooted, we have to have hopefully awareness of them, and we have to be able to see them so that it doesn't. And sometimes things just get ripped away from us and we have this moment of awakening. But usually it's like we have to see it, and then we have to work to transmute it, to transform it. And so we're having the opportunity now to see these things. And this is where, as you're saying, it's like, we can be attached to it, or we can see it as, okay, sweet me, sweet body and personality that wants these things, that clings to these things. Okay, I understand. I'm going to be gentle with you. And also it's like, you have to move on now. And this is where we have this opportunity to do the uprooting, to do the cleanup work, the purification work, to really get onward with what's going on. So what I'm seeing, especially because Mula is ruled by Niriti, the goddess of death and destruction and the underworld, it's like we're still there, but we're in the process of destruction now, where these things can get removed. And I think that's where people are feeling the frequency, and they're holding really tight to what was comfortable and the process that we just went through. And it's like, okay, what does it look like to embrace that sattva a little more, see that those things are important, but they're also not real. And we can now kind of use our body, use what we've been working with to align with purity, the pure sattvic higher teachings. And that's why, like we talked about yesterday, how important pure teachings are right now to keep us aligned, so that as we're moving into this other energy, this other frequency, we have something to kind of keep us steady and rooted. And if we don't have pure teachings, and as the root star, the foundation star that Mula is, let's get them, so that we can really have something to keep us centered while all of this stuff is kind of being thrown around within our consciousness and outside of us too.
Yeah, and pure teachings, sattvic teachings, I define them, and most do, as those that come right from a pure source. Like yoga is a pure teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the pure teachings are connected to a sadhana and a spiritual practice and a spiritual tradition. And it's distinct from ones like that human beings have created. It's not like ones are better. They all have their use, like, psychology, psychotherapy, and counseling, and all those very effective methods, but they're also mixed with a lot of human, like psychology is very rajasic. Again, it's not a judgment, but pure teachings are ones that come from a pure source. Like, again, the Sanskrit name for Jupiter is Guru, which is right from the source. And you can go read the source text, the source material. You can do the practices. Most pure teachings are rooted in a pure sadhana, a pure practice, like pranayama, mantra, yoga. These are energetic practices that don't even require a belief. They don't even require a guru, because it's you directly connecting with your purity and your pure nature. And the teacher is just a vehicle to connect you with your truth. Whereas when they get corrupted by a lot of human teaching, humans get in the way, and then, I'm the one, I'm the important one. Anyway, so just to make that distinction, something else I just wanted to show is I've been talking a lot about these same things showing up culturally. We have to understand the last several years, since even around the end of 2016, it's been quite a few years. We've had, again, I'll say it again, Saturn going through this Gandanta point and this same section of the zodiac and bringing up a lot of these dark fears. Saturn doesn't want to let go of things. He hangs on to things. Look at all of the political change. Again, not just in the US, we've definitely had our system really upended, but all around the world. We see it in Hong Kong, in Europe with Brexit, in all over in South America, in many countries, social political chaos and justice coming out, the truth coming out. However you see the truth, I'm not going to get into it here, but instead of just constant conspiracies and who knows what's happening, we're now seeing much more than we've seen before. Justice, people coming before, and we're seeing the truth come out. And again, this is also sattva.
Yeah.
Truth,
yeah.
justice, and seeing what's actually going on. And that's what it looks like. And look at the wrenching upheavals like in our society, in our culture, in our fear, and in our world. Where is all this going to lead? You can see it socially as well. Civil war or this or that. So again, we see that it's kind of, you can reflect it back personally. It's like an inner civil war. Like, can I hang on to all of my old beliefs, the conspiracy theories in our mind? And, can my life really move forward in a higher dimension if I'm still believing things that aren't real? So we can see it also measured in the real world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that's, as you're speaking, I'm remembering that another thing that I'm seeing a lot of people going through right now is that they're coming up against some pretty judgmental or kind of fierce situations where their truth is being tested. And they're kind of having to, it's either like you can believe kind of what's coming at you, but if you are truly aligned and knowing that you're working in a higher way and in a good way because you've done you're doing your work and you're doing your self-evaluation, then you don't have to go into self-doubt or insecurity because of what's coming at you. You can keep walking forward in faith, which is what people are kind of having this interesting dynamic happening. And I think that's also what is kind of coming with us from Scorpio. And also what's very important that we learned in Scorpio is that we did have to do some inner work and we did have to really look at ourselves in that kind of Scorpio way. And so hopefully we have that knowledge to now be able to differentiate between, oh, thank you, that's a good observation that you're giving me, or no, that's your own story and I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to keep going forward towards this truth. Because as I've been taught and as I've seen, that as we purify more and as we go more into the lighter, higher frequencies, the other areas of our life or those darker things also come. It's like there's always this thing that's trying to stop us from being powerful, being full within ourselves, being secure. And I think that it takes a lot of that steadfastness and kind of all of the gunas within ourselves being aligned for us to not get sucked in, but be able to keep going, because it's not like the battle or the war stops. It seems to grow actually in its power as we continue to walk forward.
Yeah.
And this is where the kind of, we're moving into this place now where we can keep getting rid of the people or the circumstances, the relationships, the old stories that keep us kind of not believing in our power and walking forward towards this higher truth. It's really the time where we can say no thank you to those things rather than getting sucked into the spiral of confusion that people can be, in right now.
Yeah. And as we progress, the tests get harder as well.
Yes.
As individuals, for sure. And I ran the clock forward here a little bit because one of the things about this, because Jupiter did just do a retrograde at the beginning of Sagittarius, he's going to actually fly through Sagittarius and not go retrograde again until he hits early Capricorn.
Right.
So he's going to traverse these nakshatras pretty quickly. And the first nakshatra of Mula, he'll be in until like early January. Then by January 10th, he goes into Purva Ashada. And as you can see, he's also he's right on Ketu. Now we're going to get Jupiter Ketu, Purva Ashada. Just real quick, my statements here is where this first nakshatra of Mula, again, is where we uproot and pull out a lot of that stressful quality of Scorpio and trust and have faith in good teachings and gurus. And again, like you said, when we don't have good gurus, that's the big crisis of this early Sagittarius. When you have good teachings, this feels very liberating. I know for me, I'm like, yay!
I know, me too, actually.
I'm just like, hey! It's like, pull it out, man. Pull it out. Really good. Because there's such powerful teachings underneath it all. But The second nakshatra is Purvashada, which is ruled by Apus, which is the god of the ocean, and it's very much it's the devotional quality. This is where the real devotional quality of Sagittarius starts to really come through, because it is about being devoted to the guru. So once you see that that guru pulls you through the darkness, and once you've uprooted and trusted that this hole, even though it feels like a hole in you, you're planting seeds of sattvic beauty and truth, and trusting that those seeds will bear out. Because this is a lot of what happens at first in spirituality. We have to go on faith a little bit. Yeah. They even say, like, fake it till you make it. When we proceed, because we know that's the right thing, even though we're scared because we don't know where it's leading, then the next nakshatra, Purvashada, is very healing, because this is the devotion that flows naturally, and the grace starts to flow a lot more. We can start to feel the grace, not as much the pain of transition in the next nakshatra, which should come early next year. But then it's going to be joined Ketu. So what are your thoughts and feelings about that early next year Purvashada shift?
Well, I think that, yes, what you're saying is it's like Purvashada seems like a more a little bit of a reprieve, kind of that watery quality of being able to, okay, now you start to sort of, it gets a little clearer after you've gone through the chaos and the transformation and the trimming and the uprooting. Okay, now how are you going to purify? You know, I really see purification as a strong aspect within Purvashada, because it also is kind of that water that holds. And it's important that that water be purified and checked in with, so that it can kind of move correctly, especially as it begins to water the seeds. It's like every aspect of it should be aligned correctly, as I said in my video too yesterday, because right now the foundation is being laid out. And so if there's not a proper foundation, if the root isn't strong, everything that grows from that is going to have aspects of the root of the foundation. And so we have the opportunity now to create a good foundation. And then as we move into Purvashada, we have the potential to, okay, now purify, now cleanse it, now kind of align with it correctly, plant the right seeds. And Jupiter being there, it's also interesting because Purvashada is ruled by Venus, which is also the kind of opposite guru, so to speak. It's sort of, they're both teachers in their own way. Jupiter just of kind of more higher Soppec teachings, so to speak. And so I think that it's an interesting thing where we may still sense I don't want to say the battle, but we still can, but it may be more easily able to be seen, especially with Ketu there, who will be sort of watching, scrutinizing kind of what's going on in our Jupiter reality, in our higher thinking, and our teachings, and all of these aspects of Jupiter. And so I think that it's interesting with Ketu, because usually Jupiter Ketu is a very spiritual conjunction, because it's very high-minded. Ketu knows how to work with Jupiter, because Jupiter gives Ketu a purpose to work in, higher-minded.
In his chart.
Sorry?
I said Hitler had Jupiter Ketu.
Interesting.
In Sagittarius.
Oh. And you can sort of see how, of course, he necessarily didn't work with it in the best way, but it's still.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, exactly right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go. I'm curious.
I was just going to say, but he was a spiritual figure to many people. I mean, this is why I always bring up this quality that Jupiter, Sagittarius, Ketu, these kinds of things. It can lead to fanaticism, because it has a lot of purity there. Ketu is trying to extract purity, which is kind of different than purification. I want to share something else really quick. It just occurred to me. Never occurred to me before. I always think of purification by fire, which is very masculine. And you start talking about water, and you're talking about purification. And that's a different kind of purification through like love and nurturing. It's like a masculine and a feminine kind of purification. Because my purification has been through like yoga and fire. And there's also the purification through love and nurturing that also purifies, which is very interesting. But Ketu Jupiter brings a lot of scrutiny of our teachers, of our teachings, of our gurus, and insists that they're pure. Again, this is a different kind of purity we have to be careful of. So it really supports pure teaching, but it also supports the fanaticism if the teachings are corrupt. And we insist on purity. This is why I often use the example of things like purifying the race, racial purity. This was Hitler's thing. And to think that wasn't a religion to him would be totally missing the point. He absolutely believed it. It's a fanatical belief. It's just, what are we fanatical about? Are we really interested in truth? Everybody says they're interested in truth. Everybody thinks they're spiritual. But how many people really are? And I mean really are to the point of doing something about it, or just telling themselves something. So Ketu insists on these kinds of things. And with Jupiter, and especially in Sagittarius, because it's what Jupiter rules, it's going to bring a very high standard. So it's going to be great for people that are studying these Sattvic teachings. But you're also going to see a real polarizing around whatever the quality is of the teachings that people have. There's going to be a fanaticism and a purity around them. So it'll be pretty tricky. So people should watch now. What do you believe? What are your beliefs? Again, as it gets closer to Ketu, it's going to be tested and challenged more. And when they're good teachings and Sattvic teachings, they become even more purified. And they become really pure. And you really see the truth in these teachings. When they're corrupt teachings, you start to split off and compartmentalize and radicalize and all of those things as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because that's what I see too in people's charts with K2 Jupiter, is that they can be highly spiritual, and they have a really strong connection and passion, but also they have a tendency to scrutinize, not really fit into any particular box. And it does kind of give that level of very like pinpointed sight towards the belief or towards a thing, which can also with Rahu, can the nodes with they almost make you a little eccentric in that quality. So exactly as you're saying, I feel like if it's a pure, really true Sattvic teaching, we can pick it apart, but it actually makes us more invested in it, because we see the truth in it. We're really digging in. But that if we dig in and it creates scrutiny or judgment or criticism, then we're still empowered in our belief system, but it kind of veers into whatever our makeup is.
And this is why it's also this simple. The deeper and the more you scrutinize purity and a pure teaching, the closer you get to purity.
Yeah.
The closer you scrutinize crazy fanatical teachings, the closer you get to crazy fanaticism.
Yeah.
They both kind of start as, I'm not really sure. What is this?
Yeah.
Right. And then we start to go deeper into it. But yeah, the way I recognize Rahu and Ketu is they both have a fanatical, obsessive nature, but Rahu is fanatical externally and kind of like in a random way, like gathering a lot. And Ketu is fanatical in narrowing and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, making it more and more narrow. And just finding fault. Not this, not that, not this, not that. No, 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 no. Rahu is like, yes, yes, yes. This too, this too, this too, yes. Ketu is like, no, 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 not this either. And starts to narrow things down. And so again, especially with this Jupiter Ketu and Purva Ashada, which is also very devotional, and devotion itself has a quality of blindness, I would say. So when we're blindly devoted to something powerful and something pure, then there's enormous gratitude. But again, just like people were blindly devoted to white supremacy or, this kind of stuff, it can also be there. So this is why we're right at this section of the Zodiac, man, is so real. These Gandanta points are so big. These sections where big transitions happen from Scorpio to Sagittarius. This is the soul evolving and leaving the earth, moving beyond the earth. And that uprooting of Mula, then that devotion of Purvashada doesn't mean we're uprooting and planting seeds of truth. We could be planting seeds of darkness, and then that's what we start to nurture in Purvashada.
Yeah.
And with Ketu there, it makes it even more extreme.
Yeah. It's powerful because it really brings your attention to it. It's like I guess the way I look at things, I'm always going in a very particular way. So I have this sometimes naive or overly hopeful idea of how things are going to play out. But as you're saying, it's true. It's like it's really important now that we're careful, because there's a lot that's kind of getting worked with and shifted and changing, and it really takes our awareness and our hopefully our truthfulness within ourselves and our honesty to do the right thing as we move forward, and to not create more separation, but to kind of bring that unity within ourselves first, but also to try to sow that more deeply collectively.
Yeah, and so as we're talking to people, like all of it, these are all universal things we're all going to be going through, and we can see we're all going through them sort of collectively now, as I said, in the world and whatnot. Without, I don't even need to get into it because we can all see it, but
Mhm.
we need to watch, even with the political stuff that's going on and this and that. There's still a lot of things going on, so we need to be careful what we plant, because
Mhm.
that's going to start to gather. That's going to start to gather momentum. And like when we're doing readings, like we were talking yesterday in the context of counseling people, these are the things that you counsel them toward,
Right.
knowing that we're all going through this. Like, okay, now you're in a transition. So now is the time to really find those pure teachings, whatever they are for the person, because everyone's a little different. What is the purest version of their teachings, and really guide them toward that now,
Mhm. Mhm.
and to plant those seeds, because then early next year it's going to be a more devotional time, and also K2 is going to be there, so it's a great opportunity for everyone to really deepen their, to really deepen this transition, um, and have it be something very transformative and very powerful
Mhm.
in ways that we won't have again for the next 12 years. It also doesn't happen all the time.
Right. Right. And as you're speaking, I'm realizing too, of course, it depends on the person's chart and
Their
what
chart.
house it's in, and what if Jupiter's their ruling planet. This also has to do with, for Pisces, for instance, with their authenticity, with their individuality, with their body, with how they express themselves, and their work, all these different things. And so will be deeply scrutinized and watched, and could really create a much more authentic, way of living. But also a lot of stuff could easily come up, and as one of my teachers says, we think it's hard to do the work, but it's much harder not to, because in that way we're still kind of fighting what's being asked of us. And so it's just very interesting to see also how it plays out for people, depending on the sign and what they're working with.
Yeah, so each individual is going to experience this differently. As we said, it's not just that Sagittarius falls, like in the ninth house from Aries, the eighth house from Taurus, seventh house from Gemini, but Jupiter is also a house ruler, which is
Mhm.
actually in many ways even more important, because
Yeah.
everyone has a different relationship with Jupiter based on their ascendant and the houses Jupiter rules.
Mhm.
For Aries, it's the ninth and 12th Lord, which is totally different. For Taurus, it's the 8th and 11th Lord. For Gemini, it's the 10th and 7th Lord. Cancer, 6th and 9th Lord. So even just based on each ascendant, their individual relationship with Jupiter is going to be different. Of
Mhm.
course, then they also have Jupiter in their chart, what that's doing.
Right.
Then they're in a dasha cycle. That's
Right.
also coming up. So Jupiter rules different things again. So once you then start to drill down into individual charts, it becomes much more anecdotal. But
Mhm.
even so, within all of that, we all still can see how powerful this is.
No, yeah.
So that's why we do it for a living as well, too, is to like read people's charts. By the way, Alix does a lot of readings, and she's a very good counselor. And her links are going to be below here in the video as well, and also does a lot of these updates. So then we move on, as we see. Then I'll run this forward. Then it goes through. We'll just watch Jupiter go through Purvashada. See, it goes through, and then passes K2, and then it goes into Uttarashada. Starts to slow down, actually. This is in early mid-March. And by then, Saturn has gone into Capricorn. So what do you think this is going to be around this time? Look at this. Around mid-January, Saturn goes into Capricorn. Now what? Save us, Alix. What?
Well, by then too, we will have gone through, I think, 2 eclipses, also involving Jupiter and Saturn. So I think that's also, by then we'll, I think, maybe see a little bit clearer too what's going on.
We'll have you
Depending
back on to talk just about the eclipse, okay?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, once Saturn moves into Capricorn, I'm curious to see what happens too, because now Jupiter and Saturn are both in their homes. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Saturn rules Capricorn. And so I think that will, it could polarize things. It could make them very strong, because now they're both more in their homes and able to work differently. I think though Saturn, when it was in Sagittarius, we've been going through this lesson for a long time of kind of this planet of duty, commitment, responsibility, really involved in learning about itself, and this kind of Sagittarius quality of what inspires me, what am I going to work hard towards, am I putting my duty and responsibility towards what inspires me. And now it's moving into Capricorn, where it's like, okay, now let's put that into action.
Yes.
Let's do something about this. It's also that brings in that Temasek energy comfortably, so to speak, with Saturn there, where it really has to do with embodiment, and having that strength within our body to walk forward and do actions, performing actions. So I think that it could work really well with Jupiter, because while we're kind of navigating this higher mindedness, we're simultaneously being asked to take it into action.
Put it into practice. Absolutely.
Put it into practice. Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I love what you're saying. I want to keep listening.
Well, I think it's just, it'll feel like pressure, like Saturn always does, but I think we'll all feel a little bit of a fresh air without the Saturn K2 dance that's been going on for a long time. So I think that will kind of, I feel that it might be not more comfortable, but there'll be more of an innate understanding with Saturn and Capricorn of how to use this energy, how to use this action, how to use this stress to really bring us out of ourselves and do something about it, but in a really not a high-minded way necessarily, a more feminine way, a more earth-based way, a more steady way. These qualities of Capricorn can really hold Saturn in a way that he'll know how to work a little better. Plus, he's not having that pressure of K2 coming in. So it's an interesting, dance that's happening between Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah, exactly. And the planets do well in their own domain because, again, Saturn in Sagittarius is it's been ungrounded, because Saturn's like, all right, Sagittarius is very abstract, like this big guru, and Saturn's like, I don't get that. I want money. I want to live. I want to survive. I want to know what to focus on and commit to and create a practical result that builds a structure. And Sagittarius is like, how do I build a structure? So it's been trying. It's not easy though. And so, Capricorn, the transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn is where we take our high-minded theories and ideas and philosophies and put them into practice and commit to that. Like you say, commit. Saturn is like, what am I focused on? What am I committed to? What am I focused on?
Right.
Can I stay the course? Because Saturn is where we want to Saturn gives us the capacity to push through the difficulty and endure the stress to meet our goals. Because if we're going to meet any goal, it's not going to be easy. We got to commit to it. We got to stay with it. And in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is a dual sign. We're like, well, maybe it's this now this. I don't know. Where the hell am I going? Capricorn, after going through Sagittarius and getting clear about what inspires us, now we're ready to commit and focus. So that's really good for Saturn.
Right.
And you called it absolutely right. Jupiter in Sagittarius, Saturn in Capricorn. Man, you got these two powerful teachers in their own signs for quite a while.
Yeah.
Jupiter's going to poke his head in Capricorn, then go back, retrograde. That's another little wrinkle, but that always happens. But the point is that it's very good in 2020. It's going to be an excellent year for us to really take a lot of these lessons from the last several years. It's been tough. And start to really get clear about what inspires us and commit to it and focus on it. And that Saturn and Capricorn is great for that.
Yeah, I've definitely been I'd say excited to see what happens when they're both in their own homes, these very slow moving planets that have been going through all sorts of different places, and now they've made it back to where they're comfortable, so to speak. And so it's where I feel like they can really show themselves in a certain way, and just to see what kind of that provides for people, as we move through this.
And you're absolutely right. It really changes the status immediately of K2.
Yeah.
Because before that, K2, Saturn is still there influencing K2. Now Saturn leaves. Now K2 is not being influenced. As soon as Jupiter goes into Sagittarius, it improves K2 because the ruler is there, but Saturn is also still there.
Right.
And these two malefics in the same house, especially a node with another malefic, is always difficult. Especially Saturn, because Saturn is so slow. You can get K2 Saturn together for a year or more. That's tough. And so he leaves, and immediately all of that worry and stress and bitterness Because Ketu just extracts this relentless quality.
Mm-hmm.
With Saturn especially, it's like not only relentless, but then disgusted and bitter and just cold about it. Again, this is how Ketu and Saturn can interact. Because Ketu is just extracting this like disgust, and Ketu disgust and Saturn fear, and it's like, oof, it's not fun. So as soon as Saturn leaves, automatically Ketu's more pressurized quality alleviates and becomes much more spiritualized for the rest of Ketu's transit.
Yeah, and Jupiter and Ketu, it's like they're not traveling as closely together as Saturn and Ketu was, which also was very intense. And they have a way of working together differently. So I think it's like there's a new energy that's kind of being watched and being worked with, and that's that Jupiter and Sagittarius, which really is much different as we're saying, than Saturn and Sagittarius. It's like there's a lot more space for a higher growth to happen because of all this kind of Soppec detached energy that's going on, that leaves a lot of potential for growth, while Saturn also creates kind of a space for us to do something about it. It's like we don't have to just live up here with everything that's going on. Saturn is saying, okay, you can also implement this. You can also do something about it.
And the need to do so.
Much. Yeah, exactly.
And just real quick also, to keep the theme going, and I've done this in all of my teachings on nakshatras and rashis. I've been teaching in the nakshatra connections to rashis for 10 years, 15 years. But this transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn is shown by the next nakshatra, which is Uttarashada. You have Mula, which uproots and plants the seeds. Purvashada nurtures the seeds. Uttarashada takes those seeds of inspiration and brings them into the world of commitment, focus, duty of Capricorn. It takes that inspiration of Sagittarius and brings it into the realm of Capricorn, which is our later victory.
Right.
Because Purvashada means early victories, which come through all of the nurturing. Just like in your childhood, you were raised. You started as a seed. You were born. You were nurtured as a child through that love and devotion. And that showed a lot of your capacity, your early victory, Uttarashada. But that leads to your later victory, which is, Purvashada is the early, and then Uttarashada is the later victories, which includes things like, karma, dharma, kala, kama, which means that those things that you've now nurtured and grown need to be focused on through action. Karma, righteousness, dharma, time, which means you need to focus on them for a long time, which is kala, desire, which is kama. This is the deity of Uttarashada. Takes those inspirations of Sagittarius out of the ethers into the relentless commitment and focus of Capricorn. Because it's just the first pada in Sagittarius. So it's that first pada of Uttarashada is Sagittarius. The last three are Capricorn. So it's mostly Capricorn. So again, we see this. This is where Jupiter's gone retrograde, but it's that first section of Capricorn where it's no longer I'm working through what inspires me and my abstract ideas. Now that comes down and I need to focus on them. And, through action, dharma, desire, I have to love those things. Again, we're here to integrate all of that. We have to love what we're doing or we're not going to do it.
Right.
So again, that's what produces those tangible results. So again, this is how the nakshatra schema also works from one Rashi to the next, and why there's a more gentle transition between Sagittarius and Capricorn than Scorpio to Sagittarius, because there's not that break. Would you like to say anything about that?
Well, I love Uttarashada. I mean, not to be biased, but I think it's really a beautiful nakshatra, because it really it does have that groundedness of kind of taking the inspiration. It's also more I guess grounded than Purvashada as well. Purvashada, there's a lot of, it's like the Purvashada is like the charging elephant, and then Uttara is kind of the chillin', like, okay, already won. Okay, the victory's complete. And I see that as like something that we can look forward to, is like, yes, we're really going through a lot of stuff right now, but this is what it's bringing us towards, is a later victory. This is what it's bringing us towards, is how to embody and take down these lessons of what we're learning and really make a difference, make a change. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. And also because the transition is easier, it's like we're able to just hopefully Saturn, will glide like that. And then it's all of a sudden like, okay, now I want to take these things down while I'm still getting new insights, because Jupiter and Ketu are in Sagittarius. Now there's an ability to sit and to know, to really know that these are the steps and this is how I'm going to do it. And that's the only way to really implement it, is to do something about it, and to see the reaction, that happens when we're in the world and we're acting and we're doing and we're working hard. We learn a lot that way, rather than these high-minded ideas.
And Saturn is in the world. Saturn is very much about, and again, it can be all the pressures and problems and stress of the world on the surface. But again, we focus so much on just the surface nature. Underneath it all, it's overcoming our stress and fear and worry that we're only something of the world. Because ultimately what Saturn gives, again, we can focus on the accomplishments of Capricorn, which are certainly there. Worldly accomplishments, but the greatest accomplishment is the knowledge of the self. And so when Saturn is in Capricorn, we also see through the illusion. We see and we have the insight that Capricorn is really about solitude and stillness. And it's one of the most mystical signs, because we have to overcome our emotional fear and stress and commit to our salvation internally first. So Capricorn is a great sign for meditation and solitude, maybe the best, because part of it is because, again, per the nature of Saturn, it's a little depressing. We feel kind of depressed, like, nothing I'm going to do is really going to work out anyway, so I better figure this out. And Saturn brings that heaviness, but that's called maturity, and we better get to it at some point. So when people have a lot of planets there, they're they can feel the sort of heaviness, but that heaviness leads to great liberation. And so just looking at the chart here, the calendar, you can see by March 13th next year, we have both Saturn and Jupiter in Uttarashada. And Jupiter will be there for quite a while, because he slows down, he goes stationary, retrograde. He'll be there for quite a while, considering he goes retrograde, he's stationed. Saturn is still there the whole time. So look, from March, from March, wow, that's a long, where is it? Oh yeah, wow. So from March 13th until like July, middle of July, we also have Jupiter and Saturn are both in Uttarashada. So that's like 4.5 months. They're both in that nakshatra of the later victory, the guaranteed victory. And again, that guaranteed victory comes from taking those inspirations and really committing to them through your actions, karma, through your purpose, dharma, through time, which is kala, through desire, which is kama, and other principles as well. But the Vishwadevas, the universal gods, are the rulers of this nakshatra. So again, very powerful year coming up in 2020, having these two great planets in their own signs for quite a while. Other things you wanted to mention, Alix?
Well, I just think, because I'm thinking now how Uttarashada is ruled by the sun in nakshatra. And so I'm thinking too how Saturn being there, will also create an interesting dynamic where humility will, of course, have to be a part of it, and being able to be of service to something greater. And I think that's also why this time right now is so important, is because it's like, okay, so we're aware that this is what's coming, and especially that powerful belief that that the victory is coming, that it's already done, and that we have that faith to keep going towards it. And in that, we have to really align ourselves with it, to kind of know that it's coming. And so in this process now, I think it's important that people are practicing that faith, as we're getting into Sagittarius, and kind of learning how to, it's like, I saw this thing online recently and I really liked it, where there was a bubble over someone's head, like, a little speech bubble, and it said, I don't fit in, or I'm, whatever. And then there was another thing where it said, well, with meditation or with awareness, there's bubbles outside of that where you still have that thought, but you're watching yourself as you're having that thought. So you're not believing it. You're just like, okay, I see you. I'm going to hold you through this, but it's not real. And I think that's what's really important right now, is that these things are still going to come up. We're human. We're moving towards sattva, but they're always there because we are here to be humans. But we have to, it's important to just be able to differentiate right now what's not real and what is. so that as we get closer to the victory, we're really doing the inner work to clear ourselves out and align with it properly. Because we're talking about what's to come, but right now we're here and it's kind of swirling. And that's exactly right, because we're being tested to align ourselves correctly and to uproot what needs to be uprooted. And I think also an important thing with Mula is to be careful about self-destructive tendencies. Because as things are getting destroyed and uprooted, I tend to see that people who have a lot of Mula energy or who are born under that star can be quite self-destructive. They can kind of be sometimes their own worst enemy and get very, they can really just rip things up at the roots and kind of create a lot of chaos for themselves. And so I think it's also important right now, as we're preparing ourselves for what's to come, that we be careful of self-destructive thoughts and tendencies and be gentle with ourselves, while also being okay with and humble to the destruction that's happening, because it's crucial as we move forward on this next step of Sagittarius to Pisces that we let go of those things and see that we're human, but we're also here, I think, to evolve our consciousness. And so we have to reconcile with that right now, especially.
That's so great. That's why I wanted to talk with you, because you're so right about the self-destructive tendencies, any destructive energy. The problem isn't that we destroy something, because we're always destroying something. It's we're destroying the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually based on some trigger, some old voice in our head that's not even ours.
Mm-hmm.
And we destroy things out of habit, not out of awareness.
Right.
And we often destroy things, again, out of fear, but the fear is often even the fear of our own growth. Again, we're just stuck in something. And because we're used to destroying the wrong thing, we just keep doing it. And again, having passed through this fire for the last couple years, even, especially the last several months with Jupiter passing through it, we're aware of this. We could be very aware of this tendency to just, here I go, ready to destroy the wrong thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't destroy the wrong thing, because now I know we've probably even done it recently and saw it and got the lesson of that. This is Jupiter going through that area of life and going, wow, I just screwed something up. Now I'm ready to do it again, but I just learned that I did it. But what do I do? So again, this is that sort of gap. But what you're saying is so true. Any kind of destructive energy demands that we have discrimination.
Oh yeah.
The simple example I use here is especially with Mula is roots and like weeding the garden.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to grow flowers, we have to pull out weeds, not just trim the top off the weeds, pull them out by the roots. You uproot them, you dig them out and pull them up.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the roots keep growing and they come back. But that's a destructive act.
Yeah.
But you can't plant flowers or something nurturing and nourishing unless you get rid of the weeds, because the weeds will suck up all the nutrition.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is so true about being gentle and kind with ourselves. The other thing I wanted to say that you mentioned, speaking about the Uttarashada and the Capricorn part, is service.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also relevant just because Saturn is there now as well. It's still also where we are right now. We still have a ways to go, and Saturn is still influencing K2 and still influencing all of this. And feeling of service, we often come to service because we feel humbled. We're often humbled because our ego fails us, and we're humbled and so it often feels like servitude and bondage. And eventually we learn that it's not servitude and bondage, it's actually service. Again, the thing that shifts all of this is what I started talking about at the beginning, what we started talking about, which was sattvic teachings. When you have pure teachings, especially from what I've found that come straight like from the yoga masters or from other spiritual dharmic traditions, all of this is put into perspective. Certainly astrology shows this transition from servitude, humility, humiliation. They come from the same word. Are you humble or are you humiliated? Saturn can kind of bring both, and they're kind of a little different part of the same process. We often feel humiliated, but the part that feels humiliated is the ego, which needs to be humbled. So we often don't get to being humbled until we go through being humiliated. So it puts humiliation in a higher context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of these themes wind up being very rich now. And to me, they really hinge on this pure teaching facet, so that we're not just feeling like a servant or a drone. We're able to feel of service and transform that, what feels humiliated or what feels unempowered, into an empowered service where we understand our highest place in the cosmos as well, and we're not just competing with others and feeling, cheated and all that stuff, which is what Saturn can feel like in the lowest quality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really good remedy for what's happening. Service is always a good remedy, but especially kind of in this next section of inspiration and hope, and also Saturn moving into something where it's really able to get put more into action, that we can really bring ourselves up out of ourselves and serve and be humbled in that way, and see how it's a good way for life to be able to work through us more properly as well, when we're kind of humbled to the flow as well, and humbled by life itself, which I think a lot of people are receiving that lesson now as well. Kind of humbled by the greater force that's sort of moving and instructing how things are working themselves out right now.
Yeah, and the thing to also say is that we're always in service to something. Because even when we say service, we think, oh well, I'm not in service to something. It's not true. We're always in service to something. Most of us are in service to things, again, like our ego or our desires. We serve them. Yeah. Some of us are in service to our children. We serve them. Some of us, if we have pets, we're in service to the pet. This is why pets teach us service. It's also why it's related to the 6th house. We're all serving something. What are we serving? What are we serving? Again, when we find something, we're all looking for something worthy of serving. That's actually what we're all looking for. We're looking, what am I here to serve? What is the higher meaning that I'm looking to serve? And again, this is why when people find that philosophy and that teaching that they're devoted to, it automatically leads to service. And this is also how Sagittarius teachings lead to Capricorn service. Because when we're putting those teachings into practice, we're serving those teachings. And it's not about us being right or us winning or whatever. We found something higher and bigger than ourselves to serve. But it's a high standard, especially in this day and age, because we're very sophisticated. We have access to a lot of data and knowledge, and we're not just programmed like we used to be to just believe something we're taught.
Right.
So with this sophisticated internet age and whatnot, our beliefs become much more volatile. We can believe all kinds of things now. We can believe anything now. And again, this is one of the big problems with the world, which we're not going to unravel, but we could just see very clearly that this is one of the big problems. We don't know what to believe in now because there's so many beliefs coming at us. But one thing I know for myself that I've seen, and those who have plugged into these dharmic teachings, you don't even have to believe in them. You practice them. This is the difference between a belief system and a practice. Spirituality is not belief system, they're practices. You do the practices, and that gives you the experience. Then the belief is in context. It's just that you have belief in what's next and what's higher. Then you become of service. Again, not to the religion or the belief, but to your own truth beyond the ego. And you're willing to be of service to that and commit to that and be humbled by all of this rather than feel like you know the way it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think I noticed myself going into service probably because as a Cancer, I'm having to deal with a lot of that with this all happening in my 6th house. But I think it's an important thing for sure. And I appreciate everything you've shared. And I feel pretty complete. I think that we've covered a lot of kind of what's going on. And I'm really grateful that we made this video because it's just, there's something very powerful happening for a lot of people right now. And it kind of just all came up at once. It was like, as soon as Jupiter moved, it seems that things got really heightened for people. And I'm seeing, as we're speaking and as I'm studying it, that of course they did, because we can't change it until we see it. And so that's how it works sometimes, is it really gets in your face so that there is hopefully not really anywhere to run, but in the direction of truth. and a higher truth. And that's exactly kind of what's being opened up to us in Sagittarius. So I think it's good to let people know that the spinning is for a reason, and the heightened energies is happening for a reason.
Well, that's why, and just real quick, this is how you start to see everything differently. This is why Alix, as a Cancer person, is feeling this so much in the service kind of sector of her life, because Sagittarius is the 6th house from Cancer. Probably feels a lot better than having that Saturn K2 there. And again, it's probably felt a lot more like servitude the last few years. Now Jupiter comes and it's like, okay, now I'm seeing the bigger picture behind what all that intensity has felt like. All of us are feeling this on some level based on whatever house Sagittarius is from. For me, as Gemini, it's my 7th house. So much issues with others. Jupiter coming, it's like, okay, feeling more of the lessons around those things. I'm glad to have you on again. Tell people, I'm going to have the links below in the video as well, but tell people your astrology reading website. Alix does great readings and also shares a lot. We'll have your YouTube channel below and also your website, but tell people about your contact info.
Great. So my website is alexandrarose.com. And I have a YouTube channel that's also Alexandra Rose. The best way, though, to follow updates for me is to like my Facebook page, which is Alexandra Rose Vedic Astrology. I just made a lengthy Facebook Live yesterday about this. And so you can follow me even more completely there as for now.
Awesome. Well, great to have you. I'm sorry I'm going to miss you this week because Alix is one of my key students, not just students, but friends that we hang out, and I'll be at the Sedona conference and Alix won't be there. So I'll notice her service and her great presence in absence. So, but anyway, it was great to have this conversation with you, and people,
likewise,
look her up and listen to all that she offers. She has great insight, as you've heard here today, and I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sam.